Hi, my name is David Lowe. Up until late last year, I was the Deputy Dean in the Faculty of Engineering at the University of Sydney. Earlier this year, I spent the first 6 weeks of a sabbatical at UCL in London before having to flee back to Australia because of COVID. One of the elements that we just started to explore during this sabbatical was the work that we had been doing at the University of Sydney on supporting students' understanding of the value and nature of professional practice. And it's this that I want to talk to you about today. Up until a few years ago, our approach to engaging students with the nature of professional practice was much like many other institutions. A combination of in-curricular elements, such as guest lectures, projects, and site visits, coupled with a requirement for a major 12-week industry placement late in the degree. This placement in particular often proved to be transformative, deeply reshaping students' understanding of professional practice and frequently their subsequent approach to their own learning. There were, however, clear limitations. It was late in the degree, and hence we were missing the opportunity for much earlier impact. It was somewhat patchy, being much more effective for some students than others. And our fixation on this specific approach meant that we were overlooking numerous other opportunities. So, in 2017, we undertook a major design review and fundamentally reshaped our approach. We started with a set of key objectives. Firstly, providing for a much greater richness and leveraging more diverse experiences that build students' capabilities. We wanted students to see their professional development as being their own responsibility and not something that they could just abrogate to us. We wanted them to take responsibility. And thirdly, we wanted students to build an ability to recognise their own strengths and needs, to identify opportunities for addressing those, and in particular, to plan for their continuing self-development, a habit that we hoped became a lifelong professional attribute. So, we launched this program in 2018. The result was something that runs continuously throughout the entire degree program. The students are required to continuously identify and undertake a sequence of professional engagement activities that cumulatively add up to 600 hours over the duration of their degree. Some of the activities are in-curricular, such as site visits, and others are extracurricular, such as students' own volunteer work. Whilst we do provide opportunities specifically for some activities, we also make it explicit that students can and should be self-identifying others that are suited to their particular circumstances. As each activity is completed, students submit a claim. Each of those claims involves students mapping the activities to specific professional competencies using the Engineers Australia's professional competency framework, and they're also required to reflect upon what they've learned and fit that into their overall development strategies. The program is split into 3 stages, each with a different focus. Stage 1, with a self-focus where they explore their own professional development. Stage 2, a team focus where they look at how they interact with others. And Stage 3 has a societal focus, which focuses on how the students' professional practice is embedded into a societal context. Students progress through these 3 stages at their own rate based on their own individual circumstances and their own ongoing development. We also scaffold the program using a sequence of workshops. At the beginning of each of the 3 primary stages, the students undertake a planning workshop where they undertake a self-assessment of their own current strengths and opportunities for development and come up with a plan for the areas that most need their attention over the following semester or 2. At the end of each stage, there is an assessment workshop where the students assess the overall suite of activity claims that they've made, and they're approved basically to move on to the next stage. And we also have regular review workshops. Students undertake at least one of these every semester to ensure their progress through the program. So the status as it stands now, where are we up to? Well, as I said, the program commenced in 2018, And even though it's only 3 years in, within a 4-year degree program, we've already seen the first students completing the whole program. We've seen very diverse reactions from students. At one extreme, we've seen almost ideological opposition, students who believe that they came to study engineering because it is technical and content focused, and find anything that challenges that to be extremely confronting. They push back, or have been pushing back very significantly against the whole reason behind this program. At the other end of the spectrum, we have, fortunately, increasingly commonly, students for whom the program has been transformative, who see that it is something that is reshaping their understanding of what engineering is. I have had students in my office in tears of delight about how it has given them a much deeper understanding of why they're studying engineering, how it fits into their overall strategies moving forward. And as I said, fortunately, these have become an increasingly greater proportion of the students. I think ultimately what we have seen is a cultural shift. That's been a shift towards students who are taking individual responsibility for their career capability development, something that wasn't particularly common previously. We've seen a cultural shift towards academic colleagues who see value in encouraging students to contextualise their learning. And we've seen a cultural shift towards a recognition that there are multiple pathways to knowledge and capability, not just a single predetermined curriculum pathway, but students bring their own circumstances and context into the degree program and can benefit from that. So ultimately, the program, which is part of a suite of initiatives that we've been undertaking, is reshaping what was a relatively conventional, content-focused, albeit very rigorous engineering program into something that is much more connected to the nature of professional practice. One quick aside before I finish, and that is that a sneak peek into some other work that we're doing. We've been undertaking significant research into students' views on professional practice, including how programs like this are changing those. And the data that we've been getting so far has been providing some quite amazing and fascinating insights. Most particularly, we've been finding that it has very much, a factor analysis of student responses has shown that there isn't just a single primary driver of students' reactions, that there is quite a broad set of factors that are shaping those student reactions, and that for different students, different factors are at play. Interestingly, the most significant factor, albeit still just one of many, appears to be students' perception related to their own level of competence with regard to professional skills. We find some students who have a very good understanding of their professional capabilities. We have other students who recognise their strengths and weaknesses with regard to technical skills, but have much less ability to recognise it with regard to professional capabilities. Often those who push back against our initiatives in this area are those who often incorrectly say, well, I'm already competent with professional skills, why do you need to teach me this? The research that we're doing is exploring this in much more detail, and would love to hear from others who would be interested in exploring it with us, or even potentially using the survey that we've developed with your own students. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Questions? Anything coming up in the chat? One from Tom at Cambridge. Does it carry weight towards the degree classification, and does this help or hinder motivation?
It depends what you mean by the degree classification. It isn't done, and intentionally we didn't do it in curricula. Sorry, I should have said to start off by saying apologies for doing it as a recorded one. I was worried that my network connection would be flaky. I didn't want to struggle with that, and I was more worried about John harassing me for going over time. So that was my way of making sure that I stayed on time. I think that it isn't We work on a credit point basis. The students don't get credit points for it, but it is hooked into the prerequisite change within the curricula, so they can't progress into certain units without having completed it. It's interesting, when we first introduced it, we did get a lot of pushback from students saying, oh, I'm not getting credit points for this, and therefore, why am I doing it? And we, it was interesting. One of the things we half jokingly said to them was, well, we can make it worth credit points, but then you'll have to pay a whole lot more for it. Would you like that? And they very quickly backed off. I guess more seriously, what I commented that we've seen a cultural shift, and one of the shifts we've seen is students not pushing back nearly as much about seeing that it is part of that normal credit point framework of the degree. And I think that's got a lot to do with the kind of the student grapevine and perceptions of it being valued. We're getting an increasing number of students who are sort of saying, well, I don't really care whether it's credit points or not. Actually, I think also part of it is that it feeds into, as I mentioned, when they do these activities, they register them as claims we've got an online system where they register them. And one of the things that system does is generate essentially an activity portfolio. And I think students are starting to see that portfolio as something that's very valuable to them on an ongoing basis. And I think that's played a significant role in managing the kind of sort of student reaction to whether it's seen as something that's a core curriculum element.
Very good. There's a question, and that follows up with a question about staff time. Has it added an additional load to staff?
We were acutely conscious not to do that. We knew that one of the big roadblocks in getting students to accept it would be getting staff, academic colleagues to accept it. And if they didn't and started to kind of white-hand it, it would kill it dead very quickly. And so we were essentially we resourced it independently. So it has very little impact, if any, on staff time. The really interesting thing is we had a lot of staff who sort of initial reaction was, oh, well, if you want to do this, yeah, go ahead, so long as it doesn't, affect me. And we've seen an increasing number of colleagues who sort of have been coming to us and saying, oh, students have kind of been pushing back, saying that they've done this site visit in my unit, can they claim that? And we say, well, yes, of course, they can write that up and reflect on it and connect it to their competencies, and then it becomes part of the program. And then we'll get colleagues say, oh, I didn't realize that. Oh, well, what about this other assessment task? What about this kind of industry-focused project? If I tweak that, would they be able to claim that as part of the program? And so there's been this kind of progressive mechanism where staff are actually, my academic colleagues are increasingly seeing value in it within their own individual courses or units or modules, and incrementally engaging with it. So it's been a kind of a fascinating kind of cultural shift that it's led.
Very good. And how are you dealing with students in the pipeline? Did everyone shift, or is this something that's being rolled in? I guess that's always the issue of new programs of this sort.
Well, absolutely. And no, we didn't. We decided it would be too much of a challenge to kind of do a large-scale transition of everyone into the program. So I mentioned that we started this in 2018, so it was only new students into the program. And so it's kind of pipelining through gradually as those students who commenced in 2018 work their way through the program. The most negative cohort we've had with reaction with respect to the program was that first cohort. And a lot of that has been them talking to the year ahead of them and saying, oh, well, they didn't have to do it, why are we? The next year after them, I think, start to talk to the ones who were the first cohort and had enough of the, yeah, there's value in this, that it started to shift. And so as we've, over the space of 3 years, we've seen progressively less negative response from students. There are still some who say, I came to university to study technical things. Why are you making me think about, professional practice? I can do that when I graduate. but it surprised us how little of that has continued.
Yeah, I think that was our experience as well. It takes 3 years for the almost for the slightly rose-tinted view to wash through the student cohort
Yes.
of what it was like before in my day. Although it takes considerably longer with academics, I find, but that's
Maybe 20 years.
exactly. Thank you very much, David. A question about just a final question, just pick up because I think this is quite an interesting one. About are other parts of the university, such as the career service, involved, or is this a local?
They are, and so the university has a career service, and so we have got them involved. They run workshops, and as I mentioned, there's the activities are a mix of in-curricular things, extracurricular opportunities that we create that students can choose to do or not, and student-driven things. You know, there's a student who goes off and does volunteering for in Australia, quite common, the Rural Fire Service. You know, they can make a claim for a certain amount of those sorts of activities where they can demonstrate the kind of the professional learning that comes out of it. And so we've had other areas of the university that have kind of latched onto this and sort of said, oh, you know, we can, the career service, I think, felt that they could justify their existence a bit more strongly by providing opportunities to our students. And so there's been quite a few examples of that across the university where other kind of central university units have seen this as a nice way of engaging with our students.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, David.